Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This episode is Psychic Self Defense. Before we get started, if you're interested in supporting the important work of Astral Club, you can do so on Patreon. If you subscribe, you can get commercial free advanced videos on Sunday. And of course, we can talk back and forth using the Patreon email. You can share your experiences with me, and you can ask questions, and I can answer them for you. We have a couple new patrons: Ryan, who is an Astral Scout, and Andras Fuchs, who is an Astral Master. And I'd like to extend my thanks to them for their support. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like to have a astral projection private lesson with me, perhaps you'd like to learn to astral project, or perhaps you'd like to increase the quality and quantity of your present projections, I'd be more than glad to help. You'll find the link to Patreon in the description, and the email to contact me about private lessons in the description as well, and I'll send you information. Okay, let's get started. Before I get into this, though, I want to extend a warning. If you are presently dealing with extreme emotional or psychological illnesses, distress, you may wish to avoid this podcast until you're feeling better. You can always listen to one of my other 200 episodes. With that said, let's move on. Kip Road reminded me recently of a book that I read years ago and by Robert Bruce, and I haven't really thought about it. I kind of integrated its message, and I moved on from there. But he reminded me of this book, so I looked it up again and thought that perhaps I can offer an episode on one particular aspect of this book that might be of interest to people who are growing spiritually and who are interested in pursuing astral projection. Now, whenever I deal with a sensitive topic, like, for instance, dealing with negative entities, psychic self-defense, I always think about it very in depth because I don't want to create fear, especially where it's not needed or it's not necessary. However, I consider myself a guide in the physical sense, not in the spiritual sense. And as such, I have a responsibility to people who listen to this channel. If I'm going to educate you in the astral world and astral projection, I also have to assist you in dealing with possible negative aspects of these experiences, of growing spiritually, of astral projecting. I kind of think of it this way. Imagine if you came to me and I was someone experienced in survival in the Alaskan wilderness. And you said, look, I'm going to travel and I'm going to live and explore the interior, the wilds of Alaska by myself. So could you please, Rick, assist me in what I need to know in order to explore this lovely land safely? Well, I could certainly share with you the various fauna and flora and tell you about the beautiful scenery and just the breathtaking environments that exist in the interior of Alaska. But if after all that lovely stuff, I didn't at least get into self-defense, I would not be doing my job properly. Yes, Alaska's a lovely place, but there are predators there in the wilderness, and you're going there by yourself. There's grizzlies who may attack you for a number of reasons or for no reason at all. Maybe they're protecting their young. Maybe they feel threatened for some reason. Maybe they're hungry and you look like an easy hot lunch. You have to be educated as to how to deal with that threat. And if I said, well, I don't want to do that because it might, be unpleasant and they wouldn't like to hear this, well, I wouldn't be really doing my proper duties. I wouldn't be fulfilling my mission with you if I didn't include that information as well. And I also think of it like a child who sees what he thinks is a monster in the corner of his room at night, and he pulls the covers over his head, thinking that if he can't see the monster, well, then the monster can't see him. Now, that's a very juvenile way of thinking, and we as adults know that's not the way you deal with an actual threat as an adult. So that's why I'm going to deal with this topic, because we exist in a multiverse that is filled with a variety of planes and a variety of entities and creatures. We can see some of them, we cannot see others. There are some that are positive and wish to assist us. There are some that are neutral and, quite frankly, don't care about humans one way or another. And then, of course, there are negative entities that are envious and exist to cause havoc in the lives of humans. So, as these things exist, how do we deal with them? How do we defend ourselves against them? Well, I'd like to discuss a particular part of this book by Robert Bruce. If you wish to get the book yourself, you can find it on Amazon, you can find it on used book sites, and if you're feeling adventurous, you can try to download it off some of the sketchy sites on the internet. I didn't want to include a link because I suspect there might be viruses floating around, and I don't want to be responsible for infecting your computer. So you do whatever you feel is necessary. But I'd like to talk about an area of his book where he mentions core images. And he has these core images are instances in our lives that are, in essence, traumatic events that become etched into your conscious and subconscious minds. In essence, they become points of weakness, points of vulnerability, and that's not good. We can't ignore their existence, and if we do so at our own peril. But let me get more into this, and I think I'll explain better as to what we're talking about. And by the way, he refers to negative entities in an abbreviation of NEGs. So that's what the word means. Now, he has a core affirmation here. He says, you should realize that you are loved and you are worthy. You are safe and you are free. You are powerfully protected. And you are the master of your body and the ruler of your mind. And I can second that, and I can say that there is no threat that can come your way that you are unable to face. It requires some courage, it requires some knowledge, but you can face it and you can be victorious. Now, these negative entities have telepathic and empathic abilities, because they can obviously influence people's minds, emotions, and urges. Some of these negs also can hear your thoughts, and they can affect your physical body, causing a variety of physiological reactions. I've alluded to this in the past, especially in infested areas where I've mentioned, like dive bars or places where drugs are used, places where traumatic events or mass traumatic events have happened. A lot of people have passed violently. These areas are particularly infested with those types of energies. So we have talked about, that they do exist and that they can affect you. Most particularly, it can affect you, I've mentioned in the past, when you're under the influence of something that is weakening your will, like alcohol, drugs, things like that. Now, all spirits, including these negative entities, are non-physical conscious beings. They're spirits that can stimulate psychic receptivity in sensitive people by stimulating their energy body chakras. Chakras are the energy centers that exist within your body, from your root chakra, which is in your reproductive area, all the way up to your crown chakra, which is on the top of your head. Now, there's a variety of ways that you can make yourself vulnerable to these situations. Channeling, which is just a more modern version of mediumship, where you are actively seeking out communication with these entities and giving them an invitation. That can certainly occur that way. Growing spiritually, you become a bright light, which in the physical world, a bright light in the darkness can summon positive entities. It can also draw in negative entities as well. That's just part of the process of becoming more psychically aware and growing spiritually. If you are on this site, if you are listening to these and other videos by others, you are already going down the path. So it's too late to turn back and try to lobotomize your spiritual knowledge in the hope that perhaps you can avoid some of these experiences. It's too late for that. You can't put the genie back in the bottle once the bottle has been opened. At any rate, I mean, for me, it's a lot like, do you really want to remain a baby in the womb forever? Because when you leave the womb, the outside world is bright and it's dangerous. So would you really want to try to remain in the womb and avoid being born and growing because you might encounter something negative? I would hope that your answer to that would be an emphatic no. At any rate, psychic sensitivity increases during relaxation and sleep, as does hypnotic suggestibility. And I'd like to insert there that astral projection and the processes associated with it are cause you to grow and increase in power and spirituality. So these things all make you a brighter light in the darkness, and as such, you can attract a wide variety of influences. Now, that heightened psychic sensitivity makes times of relaxation and sleep the prime times for possible negative to human interference, and they might be able to cause you distress. Certainly, certain types of substance abuse can definitely open up doors that are not necessary to open up, which is why if you wish to indulge in a variety of drugs or alcohol, please do so very responsibly and don't allow yourself to lose control. Having a drink is fine. Having 15 drinks is not a good idea on a lot of levels. Losing your license, getting put in prison, crashing your car, all that stuff. Not good ideas. And it certainly isn't good on your spiritual growth path as well. Now, next he talks about core images, which are these events that had a dramatic effect upon you, either positive or negative. Although typically we're talking more about the negative here, because the negative core images that he's talking about, these traumatic events that happen to you in your life, are in essence chinks in your armor. And as such, a chink in armor is a weak spot in your armor, and an attacking entity will not stop themselves from attacking in that area where you're the most vulnerable. So let's talk about that. So these core images, doorways for these negative entities, physical and psychological traumas, as I said before, become very powerful and embedded in your consciousness. The human mind has natural shields against intrusive psychic influences. Now, core images generate and accumulate negative energies, or if you want to think about it like a chink in your armor, or a sword that's become notched. Now, these core images generate and accumulate negative energies, which cause holes in your natural shielding. These negative entities can use these holes to gain access to the human mind and the energy body. Core images can also be said to cast shadows that allow these negative entities to penetrate and hide within human minds. There are different types of core image structures and various ways they can be created. All core images share similar properties. Most natural trauma memories eventually fade into the background as they are processed and healed, or at least forgotten. But if these negative entities latch onto them, like bacteria entering a wound, these memories can fester and transform into something different. So let's consider, according to Mr. Bruce here, some of the types of core images. The first is natural core images. Now, natural core images result from real life traumas, and that's what we're going to talk about here. He gets into some other things, but I think the natural images are much more of interest and much more common than some of the other phantom ones that he talks about. So we're going to dwell with natural core images, and I believe everyone has these things. I do, and so do you. Now, these natural core images result from real life traumas, bad experiences, disturbing or unresolved conflicts. The more traumatic and painful the incidents, the more powerful the natural core images can be. After serious trauma, people will have nightmares, flashbacks, and various psychological disorders as they attempt to process these core images. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a well-known condition that demonstrates the psychological aftermath of serious trauma. Think of soldiers who engage in a variety of very traumatic situations. Being in the military in a wartime environment, you have long periods of boredom punctuated by short periods of absolute terror. You know, when bombs are flying everywhere, bullets are ricocheting and flying over your head, your friends are suffering pain and being shot and killed. All of these things create long-term stress that can affect them psychologically, and we'll find out spiritually as well. The effects of any bad experience are relative to your perspective, of course. For an adult, traumatic experiences may stem from such events as I mentioned earlier: war, losing loved ones, car accidents, broken romances, and betrayal. For children, traumatic experiences may involve something like losing a much beloved pet or toy, being scared by an animal or horror movie. I still remember staying up late one night with my brother and sister, and we were fairly young, and we were watching Night of the Living Dead, the black and white zombie movie by Romero, which pretty much started an immense genre of zombie movies and games and you name it. So he definitely touched upon something. And I can tell you that movie had an impact on me, and it had a greater impact on my sister and my brother. If I'd known what it was going to really be like, I probably would have suggested we not watch it. But there you go. It obviously had an impact on me, because I watched that thing probably about 50 years ago now, and I'm still thinking about it. For instance, or perhaps children, being punished for something that they didn't do. All of this can be very upsetting events that can cause nicks in your energy shield, can weaken your defenses. Now, everyone collects these natural core images during childhood. There is no way you can exist in this physical world and go through your life without collecting some of these things. It's just impossible. So now, many of these things usually stem from even trivial matters. As adults, we begin accumulating new types of core images. The human mind and society has ways of processing and releasing the emotions relating to trauma. You can cry, you can grieve, you can sleep, you can keep busy, you can talk things out with friends or counselors. Eventually, normally, we possess or forget painful experiences and put them behind us. However, the memories still exist, but once processed, they lose the energy and urgency and fade into the background. In essence, that nick in your armor, that weakness in your sword becomes patched up. It's not as good as it used to be, but you've taken all or the vast majority of the weakness away from it, such that it's well patched, and if it's not as good as new, it's good enough. Now, when these negative entities first approach people, according to Robert Bruce, they will use whatever existing core images that still have energy behind them as a way to gain access to people's minds. They will choose the strongest natural core images available. Now, these core images represent the weakest areas of natural psychic shielding. A foothold here gives these negative entities tenuous connections until they have time to infiltrate further and affix more securely. Some people do not have much for these negative entities to work with in this respect, whereas others have plenty. The more natural core images you have, the more susceptible you are to these hostile entities. Next, let's talk about energy body attachment points. And then we're going to get into a way where you can flatten these core images. You can take the energy away from them such that they're well patched. So we'll get into that in a minute. Now, the core images generate a 3D attachment point within the structure of the human energy body. Negative attachments, or these negative attachments, generate negative energy. And these attachment points can affect your cells, tissues, and organs of the physical body. See, as above, so below. As in the spiritual, so in the physical. So we need to be aware that spiritual attacks can result eventually in physical manifestations of illness. Not always, by far not always, but it can happen. So how do we work on flattening, on dealing with, on stealing the energy away from these natural core images? Well, Bruce has a method for doing that. So first, he said, start a journal and record your progress. This record is important for future reference as core image work can become complex. Your journal will eventually contain lists of events and people, living and deceased, that in the past have caused you upset. This list may help identify people who may be affecting you in negative ways. I tend to worry less about that and more about how you perceive these people. If someone has wronged you and you still exist in a state of denying them forgiveness, especially if they have requested it, they're not the ones who are suffering, you are. You're the one holding on to these slights, not them. And that's part of a problem. Okay, next up is identifying these core images. To identify these core images, you should spend some time recalling real-life traumatic events of your past. Compile a list and an approximate timeline. It is your choice whether you start from the present and work back, or whether you go back to your earliest memories and work forward to the present. I'd like to suggest that if you have a very easy time recalling traumatic events, then this is me talking now, I would put them at the top of my list of core images to deal with. Because if you have no trouble remembering them, even if they happened years ago, then that means they still have energy that is very much still a part of your being. And it is still very much a weakness in your defenses. It's still very much preying on your mind. So I would deal with those first rather than some other way of dealing with it. Like, well, I'll start from when I was 5 and work my way forward. Or I'll start with today and work my way backwards. That's just my suggestion, though. He says, look, it's your choice how you start it and how you want to deal with it. He said, list every traumatic or disturbing event you can remember into a rough timeline. Rate the degree to which each event affected you at that time on a scale of 1 to 10. Once again, if you can remember it right off the top of your mind and it happened years ago, chances are it's towards that higher end and not the lower. If you have to think long and hard to remember something, chances are it's much lower on the scale and it's not a major problem. He also said, note how that memory of each event affects you now when you relive it. If you relive it now and you're perspiring, you're experiencing emotional distress, or psychological distress, which is why I had that warning at the beginning of this episode, because of this very fact. You have to, that's why I said, look, if you're really sensitive psychologically or emotionally, don't listen to this for now, because you're going to be confronting emotional and psychological disturbing events and images. And if you're already at your wit's end, if you're already on your last nerve or what have you, you don't want to get involved with this. This is something you want to do when you feel yourself to be in a healthy and strong frame of mind. Next up, he has what he calls a core image treatment method. Now, the technique for treating core imagery is simple. You do it while relaxing with your eyes closed. It's slightly more effective when done in an altered state, like, say, in a meditation, for instance, or if you decide to engage in self-hypnosis. But with a little practice, you can do it with your eyes closed. He says, number 1, close your eyes, relax, and settle yourself well. Focus on feeling your breathing, feeling your stomach rising and falling for a minute or so, and then begin. Number 2, call up mental imagery in question and relive it. Replay this memory within your imagination, immerse yourself in it, and try to recreate all the emotions that came with the original event. When you are ready, freeze and shrink the scene. Reach up with your body awareness hands and grab the edges of the scene from each side of your head. Interesting imagery. Then imagine and feel yourself pushing this image out and compressing the scene down to postcard size. Hold the feeling of this image in your body awareness hands, as if you were holding a real postcard at arm's length before you. Now you have a chunk of mind space that contains the essence of this memory. Now, holding the visual details of this image, when you shrink, it is not important. An indistinct blurred image is the goal. We're not trying to sharpen the image of this trauma. We're trying to take away the energy, to take away the pixels, to blur it so that it is no longer an important part of your psyche. Now, do not think about how you will shrink the image. It's easier just to do it. Reach out, grab it, push it out in front of you, as if you were holding a postcard out at arm's length before you. Number 4, turn the image over by pushing with your body awareness hand and pulling with the other, as you would in real life. You turn this postcard shape over with your body awareness hands. If the image turns over easily and you sense nothing, then there is no significant energy now attached to it. Turn and rotate it several times in all directions, just to be sure. It's a good idea to quickly treat every image with what he says, an electric violet fire. Interesting image. Just in case. Now, this only takes a few seconds, he says. Number 5, if the postcard shape is difficult to turn over, it is a core image. Considerable effort may then be required to turn it over. Concentrate and exert as much mental force as necessary. Do not allow your physical body to tense, because it might very well do that. When you relive trauma, your physical body involuntarily can tense up. At any rate, if the image will not turn, hack at it, he says, with an imaginary sword, and then burn it thoroughly with your blowtorch. I like that imagery as well. Now, take note of the resistance and return to this core image during your next session of core image work. He says that repeated sessions may be necessary to remove stubborn core images. The core image treatment process appears, he says, to catch negative entities unaware. This technique is new, and they have no idea what is happening or how to avoid it. These negative entities are generally poor at adapting to change, and I can certainly second him on that. They're not generally very intelligent. They have one pattern of predation, much like mosquitoes do. If you can come up with a way to combat a predator like a mosquito, it runs out of its tricks fairly quickly, and then you become victorious. Okay, I hope that will be of interest to you. Hopefully it will help you to deal with any past core images or trauma, and that you will patch up these chinks in your mental and psychic armor, making yourself the mighty person that you are. You have the power to become a high spiritual self, and you cannot be conquered, you cannot be attacked, because you have taken all your power back and you have bolstered your defenses, and nothing can gain victory over you. If you found that helpful, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, please hit that bell and make sure that bell's on so that you know when the 2 videos a week are posted, which are Wednesday at 2 p.m. and Saturday at 8:15 a.m. And that is Eastern Time, U.S. or New York City time. I am very interested in any questions or comments you have on this episode. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.